What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a Thursday edition of Back Your Play with Q. I'm your host, as always, Rich Quinones. So listen, we got a lot of stuff to dive into. We got our guy, Nick Kosko, as always, from On3 Sports at Nick Kosko 59. We'll get into his Philadelphia Eagles probably in about 10 or so minutes. Not much to talk about with my little blue helmet in the back. I don't even know why it's right there. I mean, I got my coffee cup. Maybe I should get rid of the helmet.
It's exposed.
Yeah,
mine's at least my Eagle helmet's at least a little bit hidden right behind my right shoulder right now. It's like there's a little shadow right there, but it's there.
Yeah, I don't know what to tell you, my friend. It's an absolute bad job from me. So not a lot of college football to dive into. We'll hit a little top 25 college hoops as well. And I love the docket that we've seen over the last couple of days. I mean, you're starting to see teams somewhat separate themselves. Nick, Alabama gets the win by 3 over Mississippi State. They're ranked second. Houston, 82-71 over UCF. You got a big game this weekend, number 11, Texas, number 4, Tennessee as well. So where are you at right now, college hoops wise? We're creeping into March right around the corner, tournament time, March Madness Selection Sunday. Do you get the sense certain teams are starting to separate themselves, or do you have any type of issues right now with how these rankings are?
I don't really have issues right now. I would say your top 5 are pretty much good. I know Kansas State lost the other night, so that was a bit of an upset. They lost to Iowa State. So, but it's a Big 12 match. Big 12 is probably the best conference right now in college basketball with the way the rankings are shaping out right now as we get closer to February. And, again, Kansas State went all the way up to 5, but they lost to Iowa State. They're ranked number 12. So that's not a big deal in my mind. Everyone's going to beat each other up. But I would say those top 4, and as I look at them again, are Purdue, Alabama, Houston, and Tennessee, all looking really good. Obviously, we have a Tennessee-Texas game coming up as well on Saturday. But Alabama and Purdue, you probably can make the argument right now one of them is the best team. I know Purdue only has the 1 loss. Alabama's got 2. So I guess by virtue of the record, you're going to say Purdue's the number 1 team after, the rankings kind of went all over the place over the last couple of polls because teams are just constantly dropping off from that number 1 spot. I mean, this might be the 3rd time, correct me if I'm wrong, or at least the 2nd time that Purdue is now the number 1 ranked team in these polls. And obviously, again, my alma mater, Rutgers, is their only loss. And speaking of them, obviously dominated Penn State the other night by 20. But those two, I would say those teams at the top right now, the Purdues, the Alabamas, the Houstons are kind of separating themselves, at least at the moment. Tennessee's really good. Texas, we've talked about him a couple of weeks ago about the whole Chris Beard situation. Obviously, with him out of the picture now, they've managed to stay afloat in the top 10. They're really good. But I would say the Big 12 is the conference right now that is establishing itself as the best conference. Now, I always grew up, Rich. I don't know about you, about the NCAA tournament. You never trust the Big 12 when you're filling out your March Madness brackets. But, hey, the Big 12 is the best conference right now. Big 10 kind of top-heavy at the moment. The SEC doesn't have that dominant Kentucky team right now. It's Alabama. Obviously, Auburn lost the other night as well. So I would say right now, your Purdue's, Alabama's, Houston's, and Tennessee right now, your top teams in the country, especially those top 3.
Yeah, so I have no problem. I mean, you're right. You can make a case for and against Purdue, for and against Alabama. If you start to look at strength and schedule, I mean, think about it. If you start to also break it down and say, all right, who have you beaten? Alabama, MSU lost to UConn. They beat UNC when they were ranked, I think, number 1. They beat Houston. We see the rankings with Houston. They beat Mississippi State as well. And then you look at some of the games. I guess what hurts sometimes is the early games on the docket when you start to stockpile some wins early on in the season. When you throw out names like, Liberty, Longwood, South Alabama, Jacksonville State, those are the type of teams where we can sit there and argue, all right, are these teams worthy of where they should be at this moment? But to your point, I look at Bama, Tennessee, Texas A&M. Don't forget about them. 14-6. Auburn, 16-4. Again, we just saw their 5-game winning streak just get snapped as well. I think Purdue overall, talent-wise, athleticism, depth, I have no problem where they're at. Number 1, I think they're the most complete team in college basketball. But that being said, Alabama, when you talk about who they've beaten, they're 5-2 in 7 games against top 25 teams. So there's some cachet there. And the funny thing is, we talk about winning streaks. They're not even the hottest team right now in the entire country is Florida Atlantic. They've won 18 straight games in a row, and they started 1-1, and now they're 19-1. They get set to take on Middle Tennessee. And it's funny because they're 8.5-point favorites against a team that's 13-7, albeit they won 4 straight. So yes, I look at Purdue. I'm okay where they're at, but you can certainly, if we're going to use the college football type of rankings, right?
Yeah.
And use that narrative, who have
Mhm.
you beaten? Certainly Alabama 5-2 against top 25 teams is a lot more impressive than what Purdue has done. And oh, by the way, they lost to your Rutgers squad.
Yeah, that's right. And actually, Rutgers does not play them again this season, probably until a Big Ten tournament
Yep.
matchup or even an NCAA tournament matchup. We don't know about that. But you know, it's funny you mentioned Alabama because I'm looking at their schedule, and then you look at the top 25 teams they've lost to is Gonzaga and UConn, which are
That's
now
right.
14 and 19 respectively.
That's right.
UConn's number 19. So that loss to UConn earlier in the year was not the best one, I would say, for Alabama. But obviously, UConn's now 16 and 5, at least from the last poll, and they were number 19 in the last poll. So that's actually a good loss now. And again, to use that college football model, it's a good loss. Gonzaga is a good loss. They're a top 15 team based on the last AP top 25. Now,
Yeah.
can Alabama keep this going? I would say, yeah, they probably can. Nate Oates has done a heck of a job with the Crimson Tide. It's amazing how that is a football school, through thick and thin. And yet now it's pretty much a football and a basketball school because of what Nate Oates has done with the Crimson Tide on the hardwood. Can they win the SEC? I would say yes. That's a big possibility. I mean, they're the clear cut best team in that conference right now. Tennessee is obviously really good. So I mean, if that's a potential SEC tournament preview down the line in March, that's a game I'd sign up for. That's a game I would definitely sit down on my couch, crack open a few cold ones and watch that one. That's a very entertaining college basketball. Can either of those teams win a national title this year? It's certainly possible, but again, it's always tough to dissect. You always look at the top three, the top five, the top 10, and everyone's like, all right, out of these top 10, who can win a national title come March? Well, it's hard to predict that because you don't have the end of the season yet, you don't have your conference tournaments yet, and then you don't have your full field of 68 yet because some of these number one teams could be out in the second or third round anyway. So it's hard to predict that this far out right now. But from what I've seen from Purdue, again, I see your argument. I just like the way Alabama's playing right now. The strength of schedule is obviously there. And I would say if you compared Alabama to Purdue straight up, I'd probably give the slight edge to the Crimson Tide right now. But hey, Purdue is only has one loss on the season, and they are number one for a reason. They're the Big Ten favorite for a reason. And they have one of the best players in the country in Zach Edey, as we talked about last week or 2 weeks ago. He is that big of a difference maker as well for the Boilermakers.
Yeah, Edey's averaging about 21 and a half points per game.
Yeah, very hard to replace that if he goes down, obviously.
Well, the next best player on the squad is I think one of their guards, Fletcher Lawyer. So or Gus Fletcher. So yeah, I look at Purdue, and you're right. You can make the case he's the best player in the nation.
You could
right now.
You absolutely could.
You brought up Tennessee, 17-3 right now. I think A&M's 14-6, Auburn's 16-4. I just put up Tennessee's schedule. Listen, they're not losing to Texas. I don't care.
No, not at home. I know Texas, and I mentioned before how Texas is 17-3. They're good. I mean, they're top 10 as well. But Tennessee at home in Knoxville, I mean, that just seems like you're bound to see Tennessee win this basketball game, and just that'll be one of those statement wins, I would say, in this college basketball season before we turn the calendar over to February.
Yeah, and they have Florida coming up, Auburn coming up. That's a big game, and then they have Alabama, I believe, the 14th of
February 15th. Bama comes to Tennessee, and right now, I mean, obviously things are going to change in the rankings most definitely in the next couple of weeks, but right now that's a number 2 versus number 4 matchup in the AP poll. That's arguably one of your games of the year before you even get to March Madness, which is kind of mind-boggling considering when we're how I mentioned the SEC again, but we're talking about Tennessee and Alabama, which are 2 football powers. Now they're running this conference in basketball while you see John Calipari in Kentucky just trying to figure out and try to get out of their own way as well.
Yeah, and you're right. Alabama is a very good team. And to your point with Purdue and Edey, and I misspoke before, and I got my wires crossed with the kid, Lawyer, the guard. He has about 12 and a half. So he's pretty much, you're right. If the big man goes down, they really don't have a ton of depth. They really, you have to
in terms of the scoring, no, they rely on him. They facilitate through him. He's a big presence defensively, obviously down low in the post. And if you eliminate that, Purdue is now forced to basically space out the floor and forced to beat you by shooting and not really that physicality that they pride themselves on all season long.
Yeah, totally agree 100%. Couple minutes with Nick Kosko on 3 Sports, Thursday edition of BYP with Q. Rich Quinones here. Saturday, Boston College, Virginia, Auburn, West Virginia, Xavier Creighton, Alabama, Oklahoma, Iowa State, Missouri. You got a bunch of top 25s, obviously, in action. And then I think we can both agree the big game is going to be out of the Big 12 that we just kind of highlighted, Texas and Tennessee. Texas ranked 10th. Tennessee, 4th in the country. I think Tennessee, to me, is one of the stronger teams in the SEC and in the nation, and they have the backcourt, and they're really good at home as well. And they've had some impressive wins this year. Where are you at right now with Tennessee?
I would say Tennessee is definitely supposed to be the favorite in this game. Obviously, I'm looking at a couple different metrics. ESPN metric has them as the win probabilities at 84.5%. So obviously that you see what the odds makers and the metrics think of Tennessee over Texas now. That's not to say Texas can't win this game on the road. Now, if they're going to win this game on the road, they're going to need more than just Marcus Carr and for the Longhorns too, who's averaging, I believe, about 17 points a game this year. They're going to need more than just him to go off. They're going to need the entire team to just rise up here in order to beat Tennessee at home. Obviously, Santiago Vescovi is I almost mispronounced his name, but he's the guy to go to for Tennessee. He's one of their better guards. He can facilitate the ball as well. He's shooting 40% from the floor as well. So Tennessee's more of a complete team, if you ask me. As far as what Texas can do, they can win this game, but Tennessee is the rightful favorite. Another game I'm looking at, it was just off the top of my head, as I remember now. Kansas, number 9 in the country right now. They're going to Kentucky. Now, I just mentioned Kentucky, how they've been kind of up and down. Oscar Tshiebwe is obviously the star of the Wildcats. He's an NBA-ready type of a player, but they've just been so weird defensively this year, where you have the elite Kentucky, then the next day you have the not-so-good Kentucky, and obviously John Calipari's been very vocal about that this season as well. But that's a very intriguing game. I know Kentucky's unranked. They are still 14-6, so it's not like they're a bunch of slobs this year. They're just not in the top 25. So I'm looking forward to that one. But I would say if Kentucky can limit Jalen Wilson of Kansas, then they might have a shot there at home. And again, it is at home, so Big Blue might have a chance at a top 10 upset right there as well. So the Big 12 SEC Challenge matches this weekend are certainly quite intriguing.
Yeah, good point on Wilson. I believe, a junior forward out of Denton, Texas. He's a big-time player, average about 22. Trying to win Player of the Year awards in that conference as well. The one thing that's been interesting so far during this season is that in years past, it's always seemed that there's always been the team, whether it's Gonzaga, whether it's Butler, whether it's Baylor, whether it's Duke, North Carolina, Michigan, you can go down the line, Kentucky, Kansas, where it's almost as though from start to finish, they're predominantly the best teams in the country. Maybe they fluctuate 1, 2, 3, but this year, Houston, Purdue, Alabama, Carolina was ranked 1 at one moment in time, right? Talk about the
if you can believe that.
Early on in the season.
Don't get me wrong. They were the quote unquote, I guess, rightful preseason number 1, because they did make the finals last year, and they came up just short, obviously. But they got Armando Bacot back, and he elected to come back to school on an NIL deal rather than test the NBA draft water. So you're thinking to yourself, well, Hubert Davis is going into year 2 with the number 1 ranked team in the preseason after getting to the NCAA finals last year. That North Carolina's going to be the team to beat this year, and sure enough, they're not the team to beat this year. But could they make a run later on? Sure, but to your point, how there's this fluctuation of number 1 teams. Now, there's no wire-to-wire teams, but as we talked about at the start of the show here, you could see the teams like Purdue, the Alabamas, the Tennessees, the Houstons. Those teams are like, you know what? We're going to float here now. We may not be number 1 each and every week, but we're going to be in the top 3, top 4, top 5. We're going to be those teams that go from beginning of the season to the end of the regular season, where you're saying, okay, that team was consistently really good to great every single week, and now they're going to be one of the favorites come March Madness in the conference tournaments, and obviously come the NCAA tournament in March.
Yeah, and then when you get to that point in time, ultimately,
then it's a crapshoot for the most part, as we know.
It is. You always want to get the best seedings. For years we would always hoot and holler about Duke in the East region, but there's never a guarantee you're going to get right in advance into the Final Four, right? There's never that guarantee. That's the beauty of And some of these games, I mean, even from a betting standpoint, it's very hard to kind of handicap some of these games because you might have a tempo that's 21.5 point dogs and they beat Houston outright. You know, you might have Rutgers that's a big dog and they beat Purdue outright. I mean, we've seen
Right.
upsets. That's why I think this year it'll be very interesting selection Sunday. You know, we know about the very intriguing matchups that we typically get with some upsets. Again, Thursday edition of BYP. Rich Quinones here. Nick Kosko on 3 Sports joining us. Give him a follow as always on Twitter at Nick Kosko 59 on 3 Sports as well on the number 3 Sports. Does a great job. College hoops, college football, high school play-by-play, college in the surrounding area in South Jersey. All right, I'll give you a minute or two to handicap, which I think right now, I'm not, listen, I don't even want to get into Saturday. I told you before we started, I was calling the fights to stream out of Mexico. I had Spanish in one ear, English in the other. My phone blowing up. I had a 14-0 deficit with the Giants. I couldn't concentrate and focus on everything. Let me just say this real quick. I am not even.
Before you even get to your point, can I just mention I love your trade? You do this to me every single. We've known each other for years, and every time we do a spot together, every time we hit together or talk together, you always say this. All right. I'm going to give you just a minute or two here to gloat about your. Now, here's the thing. That's all. I know it's coming. I'm waiting. It's the end of the segment. I know it's coming, and I'm just getting built up. Listen,
that's what makes me so genuine and endearing to the viewing audience, right? Because you know where it's coming. Because I haven't really had much to like gloat about over the last several years. So, but it is funny. That loss, it hasn't bothered me. The effort bothered me. I think they panicked a little bit. I don't believe they got overwhelmed by this. I don't believe any of that. I think they just panicked a little bit because the Eagles are just a flat out different animal. My heart wanted them to win, but my mind said you have to play the perfect game and catch the Eagles on a bad night. And that wasn't the case. The more I think about this NFC Championship, though, Nick, I'm starting to really believe this is a horrible matchup for the 49ers. And let me tell you why first. Yeah. You have arguably the best backs in the NFL in Christian McCaffrey, right? We can agree. But if you go back to that Dallas game, he kept coming out on third down. You know, we've seen that throughout the course. He's not 100%. That worries me. I don't think he's going to get to 15 to 20 touches. So I would steer clear of any type of player prop when it comes to him hit the under.
Right.
We've also seen a couple times this year where offenses have been able to really have big hits down the field, plus 35, 40-yard receptions, catch and runs against the 49ers. The other thing that bothers me is they played, I would say, 2 teams this year that have shown they have mobile quarterbacks. Chicago, early on with Fields, and then Atlanta and Mariota, and they had success, which leads me into Jalen Hurts and the RPO. Those 3 alone, I don't like any of those matchups come Sunday for the Philadelphia Eagles and San Francisco. So from that standpoint, on paper, it looks like a really tough game for the 49ers. That's I'm just giving you my Thursday gloss over.
I would say they're all valid points, and they're probably all in the category of closer to correct. It's just a different animal when it comes to the playoffs. Now, to your initial point about home field advantage and the fans and all that. Now, I don't think that was a direct factor in the previous game, but I think it makes a distinct difference, at least for certain teams like Philadelphia. They fed off that home field advantage during the Super Bowl run 5 years ago. They obviously did it last weekend. Now, was that the reason why they beat the Giants? No. Personally, I thought that game against the Giants was actually going to be closer because, again, division opponent. I fell into that trap of I thought they were going to win, but it was going to be close because, they saw them 3 times, and it's going to be a mix of the 2 games that we saw in the regular season. So maybe like one of those 24-14 wins or a 27-17 type of win where the Eagles maybe pull away late. All right, that's what I thought. Nonetheless, they look like they were the old, the September, October Philadelphia Eagles.
Agree.
And for this game this weekend against the 49ers, they scare me to death. If I'm a fan, if I'm the Eagles, that's the team I did not want to face until this very moment, which is why they had the number 1 seed. And these are the benefits of the number 1 seed. Now, McCaffrey is an absolute stud. He's a playmaker. We know how great he is, but that's a good point. The fact that if he's not 100%, does he get those 15 to 20 touches? Does he get between 7 and 12 touches? That could be a big difference. Now, The Eagles were exposed early on in the season with their run defense, a very porous run defense. They added Ndamukong Suh, Linval Joseph. They got a healthy Jordan Davis back. So that is obviously improved, and they were able to mostly contain Saquon Barkley last week, aside from what was the one long run he had, or 2 long runs he had last week. So I'm confident in them being able to limit McCaffrey and Mitchell and guys like that to, limit the damage. The biggest key for me is if the Eagles are going to win this game, which I believe they are the rightful favorite. I think they are going to win the game, and taking off my Eagle cap, they are going to win this game and get back to the Super Bowl, but it's going to be really close. And to do that, you mentioned the running backs. You have to contain McCaffrey and Mitchell, make Brock Purdy beat you. And if you try to make him beat you, he's obviously proven he can beat anybody right now. He's very good. I knew Brock Purdy was going to be good. I just didn't think he was going to be this good as a rookie coming off the bench in this type of circumstance. I thought he was going to be a decent NFL quarterback eventually down the line. But for the Eagles, where they have that advantage is that pass rush, 75 sacks, including the playoffs right now. That's one of the best totals in NFL history. If you make Brock Purdy beat you, but you rattle him, I don't care if he's 7-0, 8-0. He could have been 12-0 as a rookie this year, filling in for Trey Lance and Jimmy G. If you pressure a rookie quarterback like that in that type of hostile environment, when you have Hassan Reddick, Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox, Javon Hargrave, Ndamukong Suh, Jordan Davis, I could rattle off the entire Eagles defensive line. You have those guys coming after Brock Purdy. He could get rattled, and in turn, that could limit the damage that a guy like Deebo Samuel or Brandon Ayuk could do, because obviously the Eagles defense has tightened up in the secondary with Slay and Bradbury. The safeties have played well, even though Gardner Johnson's back. Reed Blankenship, even in certain packages out of nowhere, has played well. So they have the advantage, but you have to be able to pressure the court. If you make life a living hell for Brock Purdy, this game will definitely favor Philadelphia. And then as you mentioned, Jalen Hurts, he's the MVP for a reason. If he is able to play as efficient as he did last week without even really exposing himself on a lot of those runs, it could be a long day for the 49ers defense, but they do have the best set of linebackers that the Eagles will face all year.
Yeah. Do you have a official or unofficial prediction on BYP?
Unofficial BYP prediction, I would say, how about Philadelphia 31, San Fran 27.
All right, I can live with that one.
What's the line right now? It's 2. I think Philadelphia's 2.5, or they're 1.5.
Fluctuating, man. It's
fluctuating.
Yeah, you want that hook. You want the 3.5. That's a different animal than the 2.5, 3. So, especially when you're at home, he is.
I'll call 31-27 Philadelphia, and they'll head back to the Super Bowl. And I'm still sticking with my pick though. Before the playoffs, I said Philadelphia, Cincinnati is your Super Bowl. You can go back to my Twitter. I'm not kidding here. Not BSing you here.
Hey, listen, it's all full transparency on BYP. You know that he is Nick Kosko at Nick Kosko 59, college football hoops as well on 3 Sports, play-by-play RU Wrestling. He does high school sports in the area. Give him a follow, great follow as well. Always kind enough to join us on a Thursday edition of BYP with Q. Appreciate you, pal.
Appreciate you, Rich, as always.
All right, be well.